Again, we just want to welcome everybody to today's session. This is over our standard 3.13a, which is all about structures and functions of animals. You'll see there on the screen 5 items that you will need to participate in today's model lesson. They include a cup of water, a graduated cylinder, tongs, strainer, and pipette. So if you do not already have those in front of you, now is a great time to grab those. We are your presenters today. You have Amy Snyder, who's the Science IST. She is going to be doing a model lesson for you guys today. I'm Cassandra Hartman. I am both a Science and Social Studies IST, and I'm going to be helping Amy out as she models a really great lesson for you guys. We hope that today, as we go through this Educator's Edge, you have a better understanding of the TEKS we're going to discuss today. We're going to give you an opportunity to analyze some assessment questions so you can see how that relates to your instruction. You are going to experience a lab, like I said, that Amy will demonstrate for you. And we're going to review all the instructional resources that are available to you. So we want to start by just taking a look at the norms. I'll give you a second to read over those. Again, we just want this to be an interactive experience with cameras on, people participating in the chat, and we definitely would like for you to stay until the end so that you can get all of the valuable information and, of course, fill out the feedback form at the end to get credit. All right, so let's jump in. Like we said at the beginning, today's standard is 3.13a. You'll see it there at the top of the screen. I'm going to give you a second to read over that TEK. And as you are reading 313a, in the chat, I would like for you to put what verbs do you see that this TEK asks students to interact with. So reading the TEK and placing in the chat, what verbs do you see students will be utilizing? Absolutely. You guys are great every time. It is explore and explain. So kind of just think about what does that mean for students to do the exploring and what does it look like for students to do the explaining. Amy's going to demonstrate that for you guys today. We also want to think about when we're looking at TEKS, we want to think about the content as well. So again, take a quick look at that TEK. What specific science content do students need to master with this TEK? If you want to put those in the chat as well, you can do that. Structures and functions, absolutely. Specifically, what structures and functions of what? Yes, animals. That is an important distinction. Just as you're going through this, thinking about that students are focused on external structures, you'll see in the TEK, but those structures and functions of animals. So that content is really important. As always, we want to look at the learning targets that are partnered with that TEK. So you'll see there in the TEK, the verbs are highlighted as well as the content. And then we want to make that accessible to you and your students through the use of learning targets. So you'll see below the TEK, we have 4 learning targets that are aligned with this TEK. Go ahead and read through those learning targets and consider how do those 4 learning targets help support the standard. And as you're reading those, again in the chat, go ahead and answer that question. How do you feel like these learning targets support students understanding TEK 3.13a? Don't hesitate to reach out. If you prefer to come off of mute, you can. You can definitely put it in the chat. I see someone said a simulation absolutely shows how the animals can meet its needs. Definitely. We know that the value of science comes when students are doing that exploring through investigations, through simulations. And so you'll see that the learning targets are having students explore that relationship between structures and functions and then go through that simulation. The importance of simulations and investigations are that they provide those opportunities for our students to look at models. And we know that students, when looking at models, don't often consider what's the advantage or disadvantage of utilizing this model. So we definitely want to provide them opportunities to do that as well. People are saying in the chat that you can explore how animals adapt, that it helps them grasp literally how animals are using those structures. So yes, those are all definitely right on key for how we want students to interact with those learning targets and understand the content. So now that we've unpacked the standard and we've looked at how our curriculum, through the use of learning targets, supports that TEAK, we also want to take a look at the data. So here on this slide, you'll see that this third grade TEAK is correlated with a fifth grade TEAK 513A. And you'll see historically over the course of 4 years how students have performed on this standard in STAR. And below that, you'll see how students performed last year on the unit assessment that addressed this TEAK 313A. So in the chat, I would love for you to just jot down some of the things that you notice, both about our historical STAR data around this TEAK alignment, as well as the unit assessment data from last year. What are some of the things that you notice or even wonder as you're looking at these? Big decrease? Yep, absolutely. Over the course of 4 years, we saw a drop almost 30, a little more than 30%. Yep. Types of questioning and rigor? Absolutely. How are the questions different from how it's assessed in third grade to fifth grade? Absolutely. Mhm. It does look like hopefully in third grade, teachers are assessing and implementing this TEAK with more fidelity. That by the time that they get to you guys in fifth grade, hopefully they do have a better grasp on it. But you're right, there is a lot that goes into analyzing data around TEAKs, and all of your concerns and wonderings are definitely legitimate. And that's one of the things that we want to keep our eye on. But we also want to make sure that we consider the implications of this data. So we're going to start by looking at 2 unit assessment questions. Go ahead and just quickly look over these questions straight from a unit assessment related to 313A. And remember that when we start with the end in mind, when we look at unit assessments and how they align to the different standards, we want to consider how is this going to affect our instruction. If I have the end in mind with the different ways that students will be assessed, how does this impact the instruction I'm providing? If you have any thoughts on that, focused on these unit assessment questions, go ahead and put that in the chat or feel free to come off of mute. But how do these questions impact your instruction when it comes to this TEAK? I know that as our team, not only looks at unit assessments, but also creates them, we consider the stimuli that goes into the question. And you'll notice that in both of these questions, there is a particular stimuli, which is a photograph. And that is part of getting students to think about what is happening, relating it to a visual, right? And so in terms of instruction, you would want to make sure that your students are seeing photographs so that they can actually see those structures and functions on the actual animal bodies, right? In the chat, they were talking about targeting adaptations of animals and what they're used for. Absolutely. We want students to connect the actual parts of their body to survive. Definitely. And Jennifer says that if you know how it's going to be tested, you can make sure that the concepts are taught with the thinking that aligns with the TEK. And that's exactly right. When you know what's coming, you can make sure that your students are getting the full depth of the TEK. Kimberly says that when she, as a third grade teacher, that they focus on the language that's happening and give them those photos and simulations that match. And that's exactly right. So some unit assessment alignment, if we look at STAR assessment alignment, these are some examples of how this TEK is assessed on STAR. So go ahead and take a look at those. And again, I present you with the same question. How do these STAR assessment questions impact your instruction in the classroom? You can definitely put those in the chat. I see some teams having some discussions. That is great. Feel free to share your thinking. Targeting other animals than the ones that are being assessed. Absolutely. We definitely want science to be concept based, right? Which means that they can apply what they see in one scenario or situation and they can apply it across the board. So if I understand how this particular structure works on one animal, I might be able to apply it to a different animal in a similar fashion. Absolutely. And yes, it does help with vocabulary, right? We know by looking at these questions what levels of vocabulary there are, everything from actual content, academic vocabulary to just process words, right? And when I was looking at these questions, you'll see on the left, they have most likely, and it's in all capital letters. So do our students know what that means? So definitely vocabulary, reading a table, interacting with the question types, all of those things are important when you consider yes, how to read the table exactly. All of those things are important when you think about your instruction. It's not even just content, it is process and those test taking skills and all of those things. Good job, guys. All right, so we are about to move into the model lesson that Amy's going to demonstrate for you. And you can see here on the screen that we have all the different TEKs that are going into it, as well as the guiding question. So I'm gonna shift that over to Amy.
Hello, everyone. We're going to get started with our model lesson. So just so you know, a little bit of background is that the model lesson is going to really focus on the explore and explain. So I know how Cassandra had up the TEK, and those are the two verbs that you identified that students should be doing associated with structures and functions. So for the model lesson purposes, I'm really going to focus on the explore and explain portion of the investigation and the activity, and then we'll share with you some of the additional resources that are available within your curriculum to support this learning target. So we'll go ahead and get started with our guiding question. So when we're presenting these to students, the question that we are trying to answer with today's investigation is, how do the beaks and feet of different birds enable them to survive in their environment. And so, as we're going through the lab activity and our AIMS resource, which we'll get to in a moment, we want to just constantly be revisiting that question of how the beaks and feet, or the structures of the bird, help them to survive in their environment. So those are the connections that we're trying to get our students to make as they go through this explore and then we explain. So as we're going through, we are going to be acting like scientists. We're going to be using tools. You're going to see graduated cylinders and different types of tools in the lab activity. And we're going to use those as models to represent bird beaks. And so we'll get to that setup here in a couple of minutes, but we know that different lab tools are going to represent a model of a bird beak. So as we're going through and we're using the tools and we're studying them, we want to think about the advantages and limitations, or how our model is like the bird beak and also how it's different as well. So what the advantages and limitations of our model and what that teaches us about the type of bird beak that it is meant to represent. And so as we're going through this activity today, I want you to be thinking about the structure and the function of the bird beaks and feet. So remember that the structure is going to be the body part itself. So it's going to be the beak and the feet. And so when you think about birds, do all of their beaks and feet look the same? Right? And your students say, no, they don't. They all look different, right? So I want to think about, why do you think that they all look different, and how are they different? And how do those differences help them within the types of environment that they live, and also the types of food that they eat within their environment? So I'm going to start to share, Cassandra, my screen. Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen? Very good. Okay, so we're going to start off. Our explore is going to be some stations. So when you do this with your students, teachers, it's the bird beak buffet. And so I'm going to show you first the data sheet, which some of you may be familiar with. This lab activity. The activity it is a favorite with the students, but it's best to set it up in stations. But for the purposes of our PD, I'm just going to show you several of the stations and have you actually do one of them with the materials that you provided. And so if you notice, this is what the data sheet looks like. It is linked in the curriculum, and it gives you a description of the station itself and what food source that station represents, along with the tools that are going to be at that station that students will be able to use. So as far as the directions, students will have 20 seconds to use each type of tool to try to collect as much food as they can in 20 seconds. And so you can run this depending on how you want to set up the room in the stations, but you can run it, just have like a timer on your projector and do 20 seconds at a time, where students are using the tools and then recording their data on their data sheet. But for the purposes of our PD, I'm just going to show you the stations, and then if you could in the chat make a prediction about what tool that you think will best collect the most amount of food when you do this with your students. So we're going to start off with station 1. So station 1 is going to be the food source of seeds. So with seeds, it's important to know that the bird is going to have to access the seed, but it's also going to have to crack the shell as well to get to the food source. So we have our seeds, and then our tools that we're going to use that represent the bird beaks are going to be the tweezers, the pliers, and a large spoon. Okay, so we have tweezers, pliers, and a large spoon. So first, we want our students to make a prediction. So before they start with the 20 seconds and collecting the food with the tools, we want them to record on their data sheet their prediction. So teachers, if you could in the chat, which tool do you think will collect the most food, keeping in mind that these are seeds, so we have to crack the shell to get to the food source. So which tool do you think will collect the most food for this bird in 20 seconds? Let me see, pliers, pliers, tweezers, pliers, pliers, pliers. Very good. So the students will record their predictions and then we'll give them the 20 seconds to collect as much food as they can. It says pliers are needed to crack them as well, but a spoon could collect more in general. Good. And those are great connections for the students to make as well. So you would specify that for this food source, they have to crack open the shell. So it really wouldn't count unless they get to the seed on the inside. So they would record their data and then they can circle or highlight which one collected the most. That would be station 1. And then, of course, we want to constantly go back to our guiding question. And remember that these tools represent models of different types of bird beaks. So as we're using the tools, we want to think about the shape of them, think about the shape of our pliers versus the shape of the spoon, because that's going to connect to a different type of bird. And so thinking about what tool do you think best match? So if it's the pliers, what do you notice about the shape of the pliers and how did the pliers collect the most food? Okay, so that was station 1. So now I'm gonna have you take out your materials with your team. So you have the graduated cylinder along with a cup of water. And then your tools are the pipette, a strainer. Yours might not look exactly like mine, and that's totally okay. But a pipette, a strainer, and the tongs. So if you can take out those tools, and so you're going to have a graduated cylinder that is full of water. So that's going to represent nectar. So that's the food source of nectar. And the goal is to move the water from the graduated cylinder into, and you can move it into a cup. Okay, so take a minute. We're going to let you perform that station with your teams, just like you would with your students in 20 seconds using those tools to explore which tool or bird beak collects the most nectar. And then I'm going to stop sharing so we can highlight some of the teams that are performing this station. I'll give you a couple more, about a minute more to collect your data.
So we have here the beaker, the piper.
We're all in here.
Hi, Rosa. Did you guys have a question? Okay, so we'll go ahead and continue. Can you see my screen with the tools? Yes. Okay, so if you can drop in the chat which of those 3 tools, the pipette, the strainer, or the tongs, was able to collect the most nectar from the graduated cylinder. Okay, the pipette. See a lot of responses with the pipette. Very good. Now, remember, these represent a bird beak. This is a model for a type of bird beak. So what do you notice about the size or the shape or the structure of this pipette? So why was the pipette able to collect the most nectar? What about its structure allowed it to collect the most nectar? Okay, I see people put it's long, it's narrow. Very good. Okay, so it is able to reach into the graduated cylinder to collect the nectar. Very good. Okay, I'm going to set those aside. Okay, so now my next station is going to be, my food source is going to be fish in water. So this is represented by sunflower seeds in a cup. And again, this represents fish. And the tools that I have are tweezers, tongs, and a spoon. Okay, tweezers, tongs, and a spoon. And which one do you think will best collect the fish in the water? Now remember, we're just trying to get the fish, not the water, too much of the water. So keep that in mind. Okay, spoon. So then we allow the students to make their predictions and then go through the timer, and then they record their data on their data sheet. Very good. So for this one, the spoon would collect the most because it allows, remember this represents the model, it allows you to scoop and then collect as much food as you can when the water pours out. Okay, I see the spoon, which is like the beak of a pelican. That was a great connection. So again, we would ask the students, okay, this spoon collected the most fish in the water. So you're constantly bringing them back to the structure of the bird beak. So what about the spoon made it effective or good at collecting that food source? So why do you think that the spoon was the best tool? What about its shape or size? It is cupped. It's like a scoop. Very good. All right, great connections. Okay, so we're going to go to our next station. So this is going to be worms in soil. And so this is going to be on my tray here. You could also do it on a large plate, but it's going to be worms are represented by the rubber bands in soil. And you can even put additional soil to bury to as well. And the tools that we have are our pipette, tongs, and a large spoon. So if you can make a prediction in the chat, which tool do you think will pick up the most food? Which bird beak model? Okay, the tongs. Okay, so then I would set the timer and allow my students to use the tools to try to collect as many worms as they can. And we know that the most effective tool would be the tongs. Okay, so what about the tongs and their shape allowed them to collect the worms the best? So why did this structure, what made it collect the most worms? Like pinchers, it can grasp. Very good. The pressure can grab and pull them out. Very good. Okay. And then station 5 is going to be, our food source is insects. So insects are going to be represented by this macaroni pasta. And the tools that we have are going to be our strainer, pliers, and tweezers. Okay, so which of those tools, if you can make a prediction, do you think will be best to get the food source of our insects? Okay, strainer, tweezer, strainer. Very good, good predictions. And so then you would go through and again, repeat that process and to where you would talk to the students about the structure itself and how it collected the most. Now, your strainers may look different in your science lab. They have like the scooper ones. This is what we had for kitchen tools. But for this one, the best tool would be the tweezers. And you want to think about the shape of them and how it allows you to collect. Because mine, they would just scoop with a big scoop. But the tweezers, as far as the bird beak, because of the shape, would be most efficient in collecting insects. Okay, so at that point, the students have collected all of their data. So again, we're constantly going back to the structure of the bird beaks and talking about, okay, how does the beak shape influence the function? So then I would ask my students, so teachers, if you can respond in the chat, what is the function of a bird beak, or what is one of the purposes of a bird beak? How do bird beaks help birds in their environment? To eat, eating, to obtain food, very good, to get their food. So based on your experience with the bird beak buffet, you told me earlier that all of the bird beaks are different. So why do you think that they're different? So why do birds have different shaped beaks? The environment, they eat different types of food. Very good. So you can conclude that if one bird is eating nectar, right, from a flower, that's going to need a different shape or structure of beak than a bird that's trying to scoop fish out of the water, right? And so based on students' experience, we want them to make the connection that the structure or the part of the beak and the shape affects the function or how it gets food and the types of food that it eats within its environment. Okay, so now I'm going to pass out to the students. This is the AIMS resource, Adaptations for the Birds. And so it is linked in our curriculum, and students can make a booklet as well. And so this is going to be part of your explain. So we know that in the bird beak buffet, we really focused on beaks, but we didn't talk about feet. And so this one includes the bird beaks and feet as well. So students can create a booklet, and then also it has a set of pictures of different bird beaks. And so I'm going to show you those. And for the purposes of our PD, I'm going to have you respond in the chat. And we're going to go through a couple of these examples just like you would with your students. And so here are the pictures. And this is something that students can complete in partners as well, or in small groups where they have the text. And the way that it's set up is it's a booklet, and the first 2 pages are going to give you information about the beaks and feet of birds being adaptations and having the structure, the body part, and the function, and how it helps different types of birds. And then most of the booklet is going to give you a purpose or a function of a bird beak or feet. So for example, grasping. So we're going to go through a couple of these together. So if you can respond in the chat, which of the pictures do you think best matches the description? So we'll go through a few together. So for the purpose of grasping, these feet have large curved talons to catch prey. So which of the pictures do you think best matches that booklet? Very good. I see a lot of people putting 12. Very good. Yeah, and then I saw someone put other ones besides, so 7, 8, 12, 8 as well. And those are great connections too, because as we go through the other descriptions, you'll see like maybe that one fit a little bit, but this is a better fit based on the description. Okay, let's look at another example. Swimming. These feet are webbed and act like paddles in the water. Okay. So most are saying 9, very good. And so then the students would tape or glue that picture, and they can keep this in their science notebook. Let's do one more. I'm going to do one with a beak. Okay. Okay. This description is cracking. These beaks are short, thick, and conical. They are ideal for eating seeds. Sparrows, cardinals, and finches. Very good. So I see 3, 1. So I thought some people, there we go, 3. And then some put 1. This one could have to do with the shape as well. And it's good that students would maybe think about both. And then as they're going through, they'll see that one is a better match than others. But that's a good connection that they have a similar type of shorter shape. Very good. Okay, and then tearing or shredding, sharp, curved, and thick. These beaks allow the birds to tear meat, would be the 1. Very good. Okay, so that's an example, and then students can keep this in their science notebooks. And so they're able to explore and explain all of those different types of structures of birds, the beaks and feet, and the function of how they help them to survive in their environment. And as we're going through, especially with the bird beak buffet, we talked about with our tools, the advantages and limitations of the model and how the tweezers were similar to the bird beaks, but using that booklet would be another great opportunity to talk about, okay, how is this? Let me show this picture. Okay. So this bird might be represented in our bird beak buffet using the pipette tool. So this could be a model of this bird's beak. So thinking about advantages and limitations of models, advantages is how does it help us understand? Well, you told me that in the bird beak buffet, this tool was able to effectively get food source from the graduated cylinder or the nectar. So the advantages would it be it helped us really learn about the function of that type of bird beak, where the limitations would be, well, this isn't an actual bird beak. Maybe this one is a little bit longer and it doesn't have all of the different parts of the bird as well, but it's still a good representation and helps us learn more about the bird beak structure and function. Okay. And so now we're going to show you some, can you see my screen curriculum? Very good. So we're going to go through some of the features within your curriculum that help support this standard. So with our model lesson, we really focused again on the explore and explain, which were the bird beak buffet and then the Ames resource. And I wanted to show you in your curriculum document, specific to the model lesson, you have this script. And so it goes over everything that we just did in the model lesson. So it's going to give you an overview of the stations and what materials are at each station. The bird beak buffet data sheet is linked in there as well, along with the booklet with the pictures is linked. And then we also put in Canva for the setup of pictures, just for teacher use, for you to effectively set this up in your classrooms or in science lab. And you can see here it has a picture of each station. And we also included a picture of a type of bird that tool would closely model as well to help you as you're facilitating those discussions with your students. So hopefully this is helpful as you're carrying out and setting up for that lab. Okay, so within the curriculum, we have our teacher clarifications section. So this is really helpful for you to read over prior to teaching the learning target. So it's going to include some definitions as well as what students learned in second grade related to this TEK. So it gives you the definition, it also gives you examples, and really just the parameters of what needs to be taught in third grade, because we know that they do see this again in fourth and fifth as well. It talks about the different functions of animal structures and gives you really good background. That way, someone in the chat said it's really helpful for me to have the language of the discipline. This is a really great resource for you to visit to make sure that you're hitting that. For in the resources in your curriculum document, there is an exemplar 5E for animal structures and functions. So our model lesson that we did today, like we mentioned, was really focused on the explore and explain for bird beaks and fowl feet, which included the bird beak buffet and the adaptations for the birds with the pictures and the booklet. But there's also some other resources that are available in Savas to help you with this learning target. So there are the Savas Read About It and Literacy Station activities that are in the student consumable books, and you can also assign the read about it to students on the Savas digital platform. I know someone had mentioned in the chat it's important for them to see a lot of different types of animals and different structures. So this is great for pictures of additional animals as well. And then there's also the Savas Key Ideas presentation and activity, which is the worksheet that's within the consumable that goes with the presentation and the video that are both available in the Savas digital platform. And there is an additional Ames resource for the Elaborate, I'm Stuck on You, that allows students to explore the sticky tongue structures. So that is an option for you to facilitate with your Elaborate. And then for the Evaluate, there is an exit ticket where students will select one animal that they learned about and identify the structures or parts and the function or the purpose of how that helps the animal survive. So that's a great opportunity to have students draw a picture of one of the animals they learned about. Also a great writing opportunity for them to utilize that academic vocabulary. And there's also a structures and functions quiz available in Savas as well. And keep in mind those quizzes you can assign them digitally and you can edit them and you can also print them as well. Okay, and then for visuals to support our learners with this academic vocabulary, of course, the visuals that are available within the Ames resource for the bird beaks and feet, and then also your Savas vocabulary cards for structure and function would be great to utilize during this learning target as well. Okay, and I'll pass it to Cassandra.
All right, guys, so that concludes our model lesson for this session. We want to always give an opportunity for you guys to ask any questions that you have. So if you have any lingering thoughts or questions about what you saw today in the model lesson, anything surrounding this TEK, please feel free. You can come off of chat, raise your hand. Sorry, come off of mute. Raise your hand, put it in the chat. We don't want you to leave with anything kind of still percolating. So I'll give you a second to kind of process everything that you've seen and heard today. And if you have any questions, we also know that sometimes you leave a PD or a meeting, and after things have set in a little bit, questions and wonderings happen later. So you can always reach out to us again later if a question pops into your mind. All right, I don't see any questions coming in, so we will keep going. What we're going to do is just thank you so much for attending. If you are viewing this session asynchronously, or if you're viewing it right now, just wait because we do have our feedback and attendance form that you will complete. If you're viewing this asynchronously, just know that you will now have to complete the quiz in order to get your teacher credit hours. So we are going to stop recording now.